Incredible. Byron joins us on the roundtable now. But George, this was really one of the defining moments of the 20th century.
It was. Martin Luther King said rightly, he appropriated American rhetoric, saying, I'm not trying to change America, I'm trying to reconnect with the American past. And in that sense, he did a wonderful job.
Well, you know, the whole idea of forming a more perfect union. And over the centuries, we have tried to perfect this union. And this was a moment of really trying to perfect it mightily. But there was tremendous fear. I remember it very well. My father was majority whip of the Congress at the time, a deep Southerner, very close with President Kennedy. And the fear of violence that was palpable, and the fear that it would ruin the cause of civil rights. That was the real terror.
But it was also, for a little girl, I was not yet 4 when I watched it at home with my grandmother who was with us, and to hear those words, free at last, and to believe that at some point life would be better, that things would change, and to have witnessed the amount of change I've seen in my 50-plus years. It's amazing, it's incredible, and yet, if Dr. King were alive, he would still be marching today. Marching to raise the minimum wage, to ensure that workers could organize. He would be marching for the same values that he marched for 50 years ago.
No question about that, right, Byron?
Yeah, without a doubt. And talking to John Lewis, he talks about how the dream still lives, that only the down payment has been made. Very focused about jobs. But there was also an optimistic spirit to Congressman Lewis and to Andy Young, men who were there. And they talk about, for instance, that while those numbers are real about employment, about poverty, one number, for instance, in 1963, there were only 365,000 blacks who had a college degree. Today, there are 5.1 million. Consider in 1963, you all could have treated us like dogs, Don and I, and it would have been okay. Nothing would have happened to you. Well, that's changed in America. And so for those men who were there, who bled, they see tremendous progress.
And they're right. They're right. I mean, you know, having grown up in the Deep South in the era of Jim Crow, the difference is dramatic. And the fact that Andy Young was mayor of Atlanta and John Lewis is a member of Congress from Georgia is a great testament to the fact that when you do something like pass a voting rights bill, that it makes a difference, which is why, at the moment, what's going on about voting rights is downright evil, because it is something that really needs to keep going forward, not backward.
You know, we remember that day for the speech and for the size of the crowds and the peacefulness of it. We forget that this was the March for Jobs and Justice. When Life magazine did its cover after this, they didn't put Martin Luther King on the cover, they put Randolph and Bayard Rustin on the cover. And there has been tremendous progress, there's no question about that in all the ways that we are talking about. But the persistence of the gap between white wealth and black wealth, white income, black income, is something that has stayed almost constant for the last 2 decades.
But the gaps to which you refer were foreshadowed by something that happened 8 months after the march. 8 months after that, a young social scientist from Harvard working in the Labor Department published a report. His name was Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He said there's a crisis in African-American community because 24% of African-American children are born to unmarried women. Today it's tripled, 72%. And that, not an absence of rights, is surely the biggest impediment.
Donna, you know, it'll be incredible on Wednesday to see President Obama giving a speech from the very spot.
Right.
By the way, a dangerous thing to do. I mean, easy to be overshadowed. But what's interesting is that there is pessimism even among African Americans about what's happened under President Obama. Look at this poll from Pew just this week. 26% of African Americans say the situation for black people has improved over the past 5 years. 21%, almost as many, say it's gotten worse over the past 5 years.
Well, I think we have to look at the Great Recession of the last few years that has left African-American families devastated. Black wealth has dropped even more because of the deepness of the recession. And the fact that black unemployment is still in double digits while the overall unemployment continues to inch down. There are critical issues that the African-American community must continue to address, clearly education being the most important passport out of poverty, the criminal justice system that takes too many of our young lives and then they disappear, impacting the black family itself. But there's no question, 50 years later, with a black biracial president standing before the American people, declaring once again that dream remains, that dream is still alive.
And
It's going to be a very important
we're
moment.
almost out of time. I do have to ask you, Dan, the Washington Post the day after this. Let's take a look. This was the front page of the Washington Post the day after the march. There are a few words you will not see on that entire front page. One of them is Martin Luther King, and another is I Have a Dream.
They missed the
We
lead.
blew the story.
We missed the story.
We blew the story. I looked at the New York Times front page the other day from the day after, and they had the whole thing right there on the front page, and we didn't. But I think part of it was there was an obsession about the violence
Right.
issue.
Yes.
Right.
And King was the last speaker, and we know sometimes the last speaker gets ignored when they shouldn't be. And, if you don't change signals at the right moment, you look bad by history's mark.
And John Lewis is forever grateful that King was the last speaker. Having to speak after that would have been too much. We are out of time. Thank you very much, Byron. Really an amazing piece.